Hi, I'm Simon. I'm a counsellor based in Oxford, and this video is about following your calling, about living a life of purpose, one aligned to your values. It's made for you if you feel that deep existential angst of not knowing what you should be doing in life, but certainly feeling as though you're not there, you should be more, better, something else. Sense of being misaligned. And honestly, I think I've also made this video for myself during those early adolescent years of my mid-20s of wondering what am I meant to be doing. So the aim of this video is to talk about my own story of trying to find a purpose-driven life and waiting on the call, to dispel a couple of myths and maybe talk a bit around the philosophy of existentialism, and then finally to give some tips that might be helpful in trying to find our calling. Like many 17-year-olds, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life when I applied for university. I had alright grades and applied to a university that was close by, doing a programme that was good there and was interesting and I was reasonably good at, but to be honest, I got to the end of it and didn't really want to be a primatologist. I spent some months walking through the jungles of Indonesia and thought to myself, no, I don't think I want to do this for the rest of my life. So I got an entry-level job and then I coasted for 4 years. Happy memories working retail. I was making good friends. I enjoyed the nature of the job, but I had this angst. It almost felt like panic at times. This real angst that I wasn't doing what I was somehow supposed to be doing. I felt very self-conscious about things like how much I was earning or socioeconomic status, and ended up really berating myself. And the more I pushed myself, the harder it became to think about what is the right choice, what's the right calling, so to speak. Analysis paralysis. I was also deeply religious, and I don't know if you as the listener have any religious beliefs, but I was part of an evangelical church and they quite often talk about this charismatic ideas of hearing prophecy from God or people speaking in tongues or getting some kind of message, etc. And they read the Bible, where quite often there'd be, shepherds out tending their flock when and a vision or an angel or something will appear to them and say, you have been called, this is what you're meant to be doing, and the person will be convicted and challenged and go, oh yeah, the Lord is calling me to do this with my life, so this is what I should be doing. And then once that calling is there, I imagined that will happen, then I will feel settled and secure, the angst will go, and I will be living a purpose-driven life. But that never happened. I was stalling, waiting for the calling, but that never happened. There was no Damascus Road experience where a vision from heaven came and influenced my life, but rather it was lots of small opportunities, coincidences, and micro decisions which have led me to where I am now. And this is the first myth I think I want to dispel, that there is some cosmic calling and purpose that is tailor-made just for you, because if that's our belief, if that's what we're waiting for, we could end up waiting for quite a long time. I think instead we need to be open to opportunities, we need to be investing in ourselves, and we need to be living according to our values, but vaguely waiting that some supernatural message will come our way can be much like I'm waiting for Mr. Right, for my soulmate. It can happen for some people. Some people have a robust calling in their life or feel that they've had some kind of message from the heavens, but I think the majority of us don't sit there waiting for the calling because it might never come. One of the most famous examples of a Damascus Road experience is the picture of Isaac Newton sat out in his garden when an apple plonks him in the head, and then all of a sudden he goes, aha, eureka, and discovers gravity. But that wasn't the truth of the situation. He was already a scholar. He'd been sent home from Cambridge after a plague had come out, and he saw an apple sort of fall from outside. He was in a contemplative mood, and applied that to create this theory of gravity. He was inspired, yes, but that inspiration came out of being in a contemplative state of readiness and openness to ideas, rather than vaguely waiting on some kind of magical thing to inspire his theorem. If you are religious, your religious texts like the Bible, the traditions that you're part of, that will spell out what it is to live a righteous life. But you don't necessarily have to be a missionary or a minister. There isn't a right way to live in accordance with your faith. You can choose pretty much any profession and still be godly. So don't wait on a call, don't wait on a message, on a prophecy. You can start living your life now. You don't have to be waiting until something happened. When you think about those shepherds, for example, tending their flocks, when the angels appear, they were doing a job. They were working as shepherds. They weren't sat there in contemplation waiting for the calling. They were doing a job. And then they were shifted, then they were moved. So rather than waiting on some divine thing to speak to you, just be open to opportunities. It was opportunities that align with my values that were pretty much my story of how I am increasingly living a purpose-driven life. I was studying theology and ministry, and the place that I was studying got sold and turned into a home for the homeless. I was interested in homelessness and helping people who had come out of prison, so volunteered there for 18 months. After doing that, I got a job working in a night shelter in Oxford. From there, I worked up the ranks until I was facilitating groups in recovery, and while I was doing that, I met some people who were doing bereavement volunteering, which led to a journey of me doing bereavement volunteering, counselling myself with crews, and then finally training to be a counsellor, and where I am today, counselling, getting to make videos, and increasingly training on mental health. So my first tip is to not wait on some call to come and direct your life in a way that is perfect, awaiting this purpose-drivenness, because it's unlikely to come. And there isn't just one path and one very narrow path set out for you, but there are many choices that you can make, and none of them are incorrect. My second tip is around existentialism, because the crux of what I'm going to say today is that ultimately we have to choose our own calling in life, our own profession, our own meaning. So existentialism is all about making meaning in the face of absurdity, in the face of a universe that doesn't make an awful lot of sense, trying to make sense of it. And there are four main existential issues that come up within the counselling world: death, meaning, isolation, and freedom. The Latin word decide, decidere, literally means to cut off. When we decide on one career path, we are cutting off, we are killing the others. So making a choice on our profession involves death. In terms of meaning making, we spend an awful lot of our life in our work, and so purpose and meaning is covered by it. In terms of isolation, we alone have to decide what job we want to do. We might go into a family business, for example, but even then we're deciding to do that, or taking up opportunities, and that decision has to rest on us. And the vastness of having to take that choice, the freedom to be able to do it and make it, can be existentially overwhelming. So you've got a 4-time double whammy of angst. You can see why trying to choose your career is a lot. If I had a box of chocolates and told you can only take the caramel one, you might eat the caramel, but actually be quite disappointed and sit there wondering, I wonder what the other ones taste like. If a box of chocolates was small, there was a choice of, say, 6 chocolates, and I said you can choose any of these 6. Caramel's one of them, but another one is maybe one that you think you'll quite enjoy. You might be quite happy with your choice, maybe curious what the others are, but you're happy. If I have a chocolate store that has 1,000 chocolates to choose from, and I tell you you're only allowed to taste one, you'll likely spend quite a while deciding and be unsure if you've made the right choice. And this is a little bit like what our career paths are like. People are most happy when they have a choice, but that choice is manageable, when there is a choice of one of the 6 chocolates. But instead, the reality of our professional lives is there are thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs, and none of them is the right choice. All of them will have costs, all of them will have pros, none of them are going to be perfect. You'd think, for example, oh Simon, you're a counsellor, surely you're living your dream career, you get to listen to people all day long, and there are things I absolutely adore about my job, but then there are also things I don't like about it. There are things that are challenging, the pay, the administration, sometimes it can lead to burnout. There are lots of things that are great about it, but there are also consequences. In the same way, whatever job you choose, it's not going to be perfect. In the same way that if you went into the chocolate shop with 1,000 chocolates, no one chocolate is going to be the best. Or if you try it, you'll be questioning, you know what, would the truffle have been nicer? Don't know. My point with the existential is that there is no correct choice, and whatever choice you make, no matter how ideal it seems to be, will always have negative aspects to it. There is no perfect living. We need to accept that failure, that discomfort, that unpleasantness is part of life, and that's going to come no matter what you choose. We need to let go of the concept of finding the ideal role that's perfectly aligned with who we are as an individual. We need to just decide to decidere, to take one of the 1,000 chocolates and accept that there will be discomfort, to try and practice radical acceptance that we have chosen a career, and having chose a career is enough for us, whilst at the other end of a dialectic also knowing that if we're getting enough angst, we can always change that, we can always take other opportunities. But making a choice is the whole idea of the existential. Making a choice in the absurdity of having a chocolate shop with 1,000 chocolates, and knowing that no choice is wrong, whilst at the same time, any one choice will also not be right. Our 4th tip is on living a life aligned with your values. And to introduce it, I'm going to share a short which is scheduled for June 25th. So you may want to turn your screen 90 degrees when that starts. For people that are new to my channel, I am mostly a shorts channel. I release 3 shorts or so a week, and then a longer video like this every month or 2. So listen to the short, then I'll be back in just under a minute to talk a little bit more about values and a way that you can start to consider your values in your life. What would you say are your top values? Imagine you're one of the participants, a combatant in this joust. What is it that you're representing? Who is it that you're fighting for? What's so important to you that you'll put yourself at risk to defend it? We can do an inventory and think about our values, then we can start asking ourselves if our life is aligned with them. For example, we might say that our top priority, the thing that we value most, is our children, but we work in a busy, demanding job which takes us away from our children and gives us very little time around them, such that when we do see them, we're cross, frustrated and irritated with them rather than being able to enjoy their company. So our value of parenting is clashing with other values like work. How can we change our life to reflect our values so that we're jousting for what's important? So, like the short suggested, if we know our values, we can start living a life that is aligned with them and take inventory to see if our current behaviour, occupation, what we do in our life is conflicting with multiple values and leaving us with a sense of being dissatisfied because we're not meeting them. If you click in the description for this video, you'll notice in the doobly-doo there is a link to an article which takes the key points of this and goes into a little bit more detail. On that article, again, you'll be able to click a link and it will download a A4 page that has 52 different values written down on it. And then, much like the short on the side I'm showing while speaking, what I'd like you to do is then chop up those 52 values into little tiny pieces. So you've got 52 very small cards that talk about values. You can then put them into 3 columns, the ones which are very strongly correlated with you, the ones you kind of feel indifferent towards, and then the ones that don't really resonate at all. And you should have a fair pile by the end of it of values that are quite important to you. From those important values, I'd then like you to look at your top 5 values and pop those values in descending order of what is the most important through to what is the least important for you. Once you've got a stronger idea of your values, of the things that you prize in life, start to question what a career path aligned with those values might look like for you. Or if you're finding yourself experiencing angst in your current career, start thinking about, what is it about my role that isn't quite hitting my needs, I'm not quite feeling satisfied with? And is there a way that I could increase those things so that my life feels as though it's more aligned with my values? Alternatively, if you don't want to download the handout, which I think is a very good way to do it, there's something about having values that you can physically see and touch and move around and adjust, then I'm going to read all 52 out, put them down in front of the camera, and all I need you to do is just close your eyes and wave them up as I say them, and just maybe hold your hand out and think, yeah, of all those 52, these are the 5 that are most important. And even just doing that meditative exercise of listening to me say a random list of values and you saying, that feels important or that doesn't feel important, might help you align your life. So first up, we've got security, then discipline or punctuality, respect, honesty and integrity, accountability, equality and justice, law and order, wisdom, humility, authenticity, calm or peace, reliability, openness, adaptability, courage and bravery, confidence, belonging and community, care and compassion, loyalty, freedom, spirituality, uniqueness, environment and nature, learning, intellect, friendships, balance, simplicity, beauty, competence, success or career, sportsmanship, family, legacy and making a difference, parenting, pleasure and stimulation, leadership and power, influence and fame, truth, adventures or travel, cooperation, love, humour, health, safety, conformity and tradition, mastery, autonomy, dignity and respect, creativity and innovation, sexuality, and finally, financial stability. So you heard me read those values out, and just have a think if any of those in particular really resonate with you, and how you can make your life lean more heavily into the values that align best to you. A little disclaimer that no job is going to perfectly fit all of your values, but we can try and live a life which aligns strongly with as many of them as possible. And it's also worth noting at this point to say that your career alone won't completely fulfill you in your life. And it's thinking about how we can balance certain aspects of our life with others. On that note, my fifth point is about living in an individualist culture. Most people listening to this are from the UK, and the UK, like most of the Western world, is part of a individualist postmodern society. When I say that, I mean that we prize the efforts of the individual and what they do to make of their life. We are capitalist, and we put value and status on people who earn more or have a higher kind of paid role, that kind of thing. And usually when we meet a stranger at a party, for example, the first kind of question we might ask them is, what do you do for a living? That's kind of how we assess status. But not every society is individualist. Many societies instead have a collectivist form of culture, where instead of basing your status off of what you do for a living, that same party, a person in the collectivist society, might ask a question along the lines of, how many brothers or sisters do you have? Are your parents alive? Do you have any children? They're interested in family, the community you're part of, and your status is informed by that community, by that culture. It's where ideas around societal shame or honour might come from, because your status isn't just derived from you and what you're doing, how much money you earn, what you make it, but it's derived from your whole family. Both individualist and collectivist cultures have their pros and cons. Neither of them are right or wrong, and you as a listener probably belong to an individualist one. So I think what I'm trying to say within this is we're very rarely aware of our worldview, and it can be helpful to pause for a second and think that maybe our career, what we do for money, maybe that's not everything. And that's especially true if we're not working, because not everybody is or is able to. If our identity is solely formed around the job we do, if our value is only based around what do you do for a living at cocktail parties, then that puts a tremendous pressure on finding the right role, on choosing the right chocolate in our sweet shop full of 1,000 chocolates. And that pressure to find the right role, our calling, can be really debilitating. Maybe it would be helpful if we could let go of our individualist worldview for just a bit, so that our identity isn't based on what we do for a living. Because that is way too much pressure. It will paralyse us from searching. And we're very likely to be disappointed if our worth is just being based on our role. Because like in the previous one, when we looked at values, our work alone isn't going to meet all of our values. And if we're looking for work to do that, well, we're going to be sorely disappointed. My sixth point is to be really realistic when we're thinking about what our calling is, what we're to do with our life. I quite like making these videos, for example, on YouTube. But I've been at this 2 years, and I'm really not expecting to get monetized or for it to turn into anything. If I was desperately trying to, I might make progress, but it's unrealistic. And it might be that you've done the values exercise and you've thought about purpose and you've been, wondering what to do with your life, and you've got an idea of what you enjoy, but I don't know, there might be really practical limits to it. There's no money in it, there's no opportunities, it doesn't exist outside of a hobby. Let's be realistic about it. It might be that something changes as well. For example, if my entire career was based around doing this, I imagine I probably wouldn't have as much joy in making little videos. It would change the dynamics of it. Tip 7 is that finding our calling is not a destination, rather it's about the journey. Our Disney classics have an engaging story of adventure and action in which a prince and princess overcome obstacles, tackle the villain, and then they're united together and experience a happily ever after. It's exciting, it's engaging to hear how they come to know one another, overcome obstacles of true love's kiss, and then forevermore they're happy. But that isn't a reality for most relationships. It's the happily ever afters that are the majority of life, not the couple of days of adventure leading to the matchmaking. And this is the same in our career, in our purpose, in our job, in what we're doing with our life. It's not about a destination, it's an ongoing journey. The happily ever after, actually that's the meat, that's where the bulk of life is. So much like the previous points around individualism and our career not being everything, or about being realistic, let's realise that the bulk of life isn't going to be finding our dream career and then everything is sorted, because the happily ever after is the bit that we really need to work on. So don't see finding your calling, your purpose, your dream job, whatever you want to call it, don't see that as a destination. See it as a journey which you will never stop walking, and don't aim to stop walking it. Aim to keep making your career your career. Aim to keep working on that calling, not to have it as a finality, but to have it as a process. Aware of time, I'll try and keep this video to about half an hour. My closing tips, the 8th one, is all of the things that I spoke about in the procrastination video, the first one I ever made. And I think the main points are just to look at any pressures that are sort of forcing you into trying to find your ideal career, to break it down so it's not this huge conceptual thing, but make it more tangible of actually what it looks like to find your calling. Just to really make a start, which is a lot easier when we break it down. Imagine you're climbing a ladder and just think, what would the next rung of the ladder look like? What would the next step look like? Rather than thinking, I have to find this dream job that's going to make my life forever. And then the final thing to say is to enjoy it. We spend a third of our life at work. Find something that you're good at, you get a bit of joy from, but you can put the grind into. It's not always going to be pleasant, but it doesn't have to be miserable. Find something you enjoy and enjoy the process of finding it. Thank you for listening. My name's Simon. I'm a counsellor based online or in Oxford if you want to meet face to face, and I work with a whole host of things in a really relational way with a little bit of psychoeducation if it's helpful. If you would like to meet with me and to get the value things out and to put them in order and work out your own values, then I would love to journey with you. And likewise, if you want to check out some of my other videos, for example, the procrastination video, the very first one I ever made, then do very much feel free to check that out. You can learn more about me on my website at www.simonslistening.co.uk, and you can find me on TikTok at Simon's Listening and on Facebook at Simon's Listening Counselling Services. Thank you for listening, and I managed to keep it to under 30 minutes. The final thing to say is, if you would like to comment on this video, I'm a fairly small channel, I would love to read them, but always bear in mind confidentiality, that comments on YouTube are out in the public domain. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day.